The reactor exploded and all of it went into the city.
And what happened next?
No, but my teacher showed me a video where she stands near the reactor and shows a thermometer where you can see that there's not much radiation there anymore, but in Pripyat all the radiation went there. I only know that they euthanized animals there. People died from radiation sickness, then development.
Cancer and contamination of the area.
That is, the radioactive field was very large, starting from the explosion point itself and spread all the way to Kyiv and other countries.
Some died and some were just affected, and then they moved to different countries. All the people perished. Radiation remained there, and it's very dangerous there.
Undoubtedly a tragic event for the countries, not just for our country.
People were told they would be evacuated for 3 days, but they were evacuated for life.
Editor.
On December 22nd, 1983, on Energy Day, which was celebrated in the city of Pripyat, Kyiv region of Ukraine, with great fanfare, A. Zakharova, the proofreader, informed the residents that the fourth reactor of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, named after Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, was launched, and A. Yegorova began its operation in normal mode. On this happy day for many Atomic City residents, no one could even imagine that in 2 years, reactor number 4 would become the cause of a disaster that would destroy the entire city. On April 26, 1986, after the explosion, 1,600 fuel channels of the reactor's active zone were exposed, resulting in radiation 400 times the amount released in Hiroshima entering the fresh air of the Ukrainian night. The year 86 in the Soviet Union could have been a year of breakthroughs. Anatoly Karpov and Garry Kasparov met for the third time in the World Chess Championship final. The Mir space station was launched, and Gorbachev and Reagan took another step towards the complete end of the Cold War. But the first association that comes to people's minds when mentioning the Soviet Union in 86 is Chernobyl. The construction of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant began in 70. Thousands of people were needed for maintenance, support, testing, further development and expansion of the plant. Therefore, it was decided to build a satellite city 4 kilometers from the station, which became a model of modern Soviet architecture. Hospitals, a cinema, a hotel, an art school, a palace of culture, 3 swimming pools and 15 kindergartens appeared. Despite the grim proximity to the cluster of atomic energy enclosed in reactors, Pripyat, by Soviet standards, looked like a city of the future. But in one moment, all efforts were crossed out by a powerful explosion at the 4th block of the nuclear power plant. The evacuation of the population began the next day, and in 13 hours, Pripyat was emptied forever. Pripyat was an ideal place to create a new football club because the overwhelming majority of the townspeople were talented young employees who were somehow connected to the nuclear power plant. The average age of the residents was only 26 years, and young people needed leisure activities to spend their free time. And the football club, which was named Stroitel, fulfilled this need.
I once came to Pripyat to play football. I have been involved in football since childhood. We played some games here. I came here before my service. And after the service, my fellow countrymen from Bila Tserkva, I myself am from Bila Tserkva, my fellow countrymen from Bila Tserkva invited me to come here. This is a normal city. They quickly give out apartments. My daughter, who was born in Pripyat in December, on December 13th. This photo is literally a month before the accident. A week before the Chernobyl accident, I took them to my parents in Bila Tserkva. Thus, I preserved the health of my children. It happened by chance, and I went back to prepare for the scheduled game.
In 1981, a builder from Pripyat showed a serious intention to become a successful club. The team was led by Anatoly Shepel, a former player of the Soviet national team and Kyiv's Dynamo. To better understand the scale of such an event, it's like Sergei Semak now leading a team from the second league. Shepel's appointment in Pripyat was primarily a sign of the club's high ambitions.
A beautiful little town. A beautiful little town, and not only was it built with such an aesthetic, not exotic, but aesthetic and exotic altogether, but it was a town that inspired people to live there. I arrived and got in line for a 2-room apartment. I didn't manage to get the apartment. But we lived in a small family unit, and it suited us. That was our living base.
It looks like a residential building now, right?
Well, basically like a residential building, yes.
Nearby the place is clean.
Well, a small family unit and a big common corridor.
What does a small family unit mean? A small family unit means small apartments, right?
A small family unit, well, there's, for example, a dormitory, and there's a small family unit where families lived. And in a dormitory, usually bachelors live. And in a small family unit, people who have families, a child, and so on life. I returned here around the 4th or 5th of June, 1986. I illegally entered my apartment by breaking the glass. I took the documents, took the photographs. I knocked over a book. I lived on the first floor. They gave me a room there with another family. And the most interesting thing is, when the child was born, the child was outside in a stroller. I watched TV and took a string, stretched it from the stroller. If she cried, I started rocking it so I wouldn't have to go outside and stand. Those were the kind of jokes. Well, I already told you that I broke into the apartment, broke the glass, and the security came. They almost arrested me. But since I lived here, and I recognized an acquaintance. They let me go. They didn't take any measures. Here's the concierge. And my apartment was number 1. The elevator equipment had already gone somewhere. Number 1, is it this one? Yes, this one. The cashier said, here, you see the keys were hanging. The tenants handed them in. And I lived in this apartment. That's 100%. I lived in this apartment. In this apartment, yes, here's our room. We had everything. We had a sofa. We had a wardrobe. We had a TV. We had a tape recorder. There was a carpet hanging here. Holes were made. So many years have passed. We had one room. It was temporary.
Did you live here, your wife and daughter?
Yes, the 2 of us and a little daughter who was already 4 months old. We passed on the photographs. They were lying here in the wardrobe. I took them on the 4th or 6th or 5th of June of '86. They returned here, well, if you put them in the wardrobe, after so many years, can you imagine these photos which are from Pripyat, before Pripyat? They were all here because when I left, I didn't take them. Everything remained. I believed we would return in 3 days. And that's what they told us. Don't take things with you. Take food, warm clothes for 2 or 3 days. And that's it. That's what I did. It turns out I left for 34 years and everyone left for life. This is a team photo just before the accident. There are guys who are no longer with us, who have passed away.
The Soviet football system at that time looked like this. Below the top, first and second leagues were numerous amateur tournaments of physical culture committees, which every year fought to get into the second league and the opportunity to play with teams from all over the Union. In one of these tournaments, the football club Stroitel began to perform.
Like any football player, I wanted to play, and I liked the conditions here. I liked the team that was here. I knew the guys. They treated me well. The living conditions were also fine, and they set goals. They set goals to eventually move up in class and play in the semi-league. Our club, the Builders, had its own football field, which we maintained. A new stadium was being built. There was a base, this sports complex, which had a gym, a sauna. Outside there was a hockey rink where we sometimes had ice training sessions that yielded positive results. And of course there was the arena. This building was very large. For our team, it was perfect for winter. We trained here, prepared. There were interesting moments when we would finish training, grab some beer, and head to the sand to sit and drink. Because after training, you really want to drink. We hid from training, sat and drank. This was when we played football with Bila Cerkva. I remember clearly because it's my hometown. So, against the backdrop of the fourth block, which was still intact, it was played right from the stadium, right from the stands. You could see the small fourth block and the entire station.
Unfortunately, fans will never be able to attend a match of the Pripyat Builders Football Club. But imagine how many such tournaments are held across the post-Soviet space of Europe. There are their own champions, best players and passion. And you can participate in all this with your smartphone and the Marathon Bet mobile app. Here, besides top league matches, you'll find betting options for lower divisions and even youth championships with some of the highest odds on the market. Plus, an intuitive interface that can be mastered in just a few clicks, transparency in bet calculations and absolute honesty in payout of winnings. Unseen Football tells stories and Marathon Bet gives you the opportunity to touch them.
And in this hall was the day of evacuation. We gathered, there were even gatherings around 10 o'clock. 9 or 10, I can't remember now, at the stadium. I went up to the 9th floor, to the base where our guys lived, and the guys told me that the station exploded. But as usual, jokes, our guys joke. I didn't believe it. I didn't believe it until they dragged me to the window and showed me, look, the block is burning. I really looked. One.
Of the terrifying signs of that time was people with nuclear tans. Those who were unlucky enough to receive a large dose of radiation wondered why their skin suddenly turned brown, even under clothing. The thing is, the body was already damaged by intense radiation. Not everyone realized the danger, as on the day of the accident, many even deliberately sunbathed on the roofs and by the river near the nuclear power plant, and the sun only intensified the radiation's effect.
The first thing I remember, such a sad sight, yes, children were taken to camps, parents cried about where they were being taken, and in principle, no one knew how to deal with it. And no one knew what the future held for Kyiv, because by air, it's a distance of 90 kilometers. There was no panic, there was no feeling that radiation was hitting you, because we didn't know what it was. We practically didn't know. No one could measure radiation. We didn't have devices except for the specialists who were directly at the station. We didn't know what the level was. We could just feel some bitterness in our mouths. And the conversations and the situation, there was a helicopter flying. It was like helicopters were flying over the city. It was already tense. My friend worked there as an engineer and he literally walked on the 26th. He came to Kyiv to me in Obolon. I have two boys, kids 10 and 11 years old. He says, don't let them out of the house. I ask, why, Vova? And then he told me really, almost really, he didn't know all the details either. But he said, an explosion, and this accident won't just end like that.
One of the most mysterious and frightening places in the zone is the Red Forest. When it was just an ordinary pine forest, it separated the nuclear power plant and the city of Pripyat. Tourists used to walk through it, and locals would gather mushrooms and berries. On the night of the accident, this forest was the first to take the radioactive hit. It was covered by a cloud from the destroyed reactor. The wind was blowing towards Pripyat, and if it weren't for this living barrier, the city would have received a terrible dose of radiation.
They announced there would be an evacuation. The game was cancelled. The city was closed. And they said everything was fine, the levels were within normal limits. During the evacuation, before the evacuation, all the buses from many regions were lined up here on the road. And where the Red Forest is, they were standing there too. and not knowing how much they received there. It's horrifying. Then these buses arrived. On Sunday, they took us away. They left, took people away, and went back to their parks. And again, they transported people, these dirty ones. Where did the people come from? It's not for nothing they do it like that. Medical stuff comes out. It's not for nothing. Well, I started comparing, analyzing why they were walking, and then the station exploded, and I realized it was very serious. I was just a little calm because I took my loved ones home. I realized that I might have saved a child somewhere from life or health. Volunteers were recruited to Chernobyl. My acquaintance volunteered. He left. He was on that on a truck, either loading radioactive waste or he was driving. I never quite understood. So with my radiation exposure, he's still being treated. Of course, it's a tragedy, but I believe it's a prepared tragedy. I think it was sabotage. Why do I think so? In '81, when I was in Chernobyl, I saw how it was being built. It's not being built now. Back then, everything was built seriously. The responsibility was very serious. Moreover, there were 1 million controlling organizations. And in principle, this explosion couldn't just happen. Besides, this is before the collapse of the Soviet Union. Why did it decide in the collapse of the Soviet Union? Because I think more than half of the Union's budget was then spent on saving Chernobyl. This is a pool. It's not just us. Well, our team usually recovered here. The showers. There was a restroom here. The wood is nailed. See? Everything. Or someone took it away. The wood, to say it faster, someone took it away. And here there used to be a locker room, and the girls from the top league handball team changed here. And some guys climbed through this window and stole all the gold, all the money, and then they covered it with a grate. It feels like they smoked fish here. You get it? Liquidators. 100%, they probably smoked fish. Here are the photos. I worked at Chernobyl on shifts on the accident liquidation as a dosimetrist. I'm standing with a dosimeter. When I worked as a dosimetrist, I walked in a mask all the time because beta particles are dust and products. I didn't eat what they ate. They caught fish. I ate once, I remember. They caught such catfish. There were pikes and so on the drifts in winter. And they ate. I immediately told them, guys, what are you doing? We have dirt. It stays here, right there. Here's a photo. The second phase. The second phase, the 5th block. I led a team for bringing metal sheets for cladding for conservation of the 5th and 6th blocks. Here we are on the hockey rink. See the boards? Here they go. We played hockey here, and soccer. And then they took out this trash. I don't know. You know, I feel with my feet that, like it or not, there's some radiation somewhere. I feel it with my feet. You wouldn't believe it. There's a cafe standing, as they say, on the spot where those missiles that traveled from Kiev to Chernobyl were disarmed and landed. So mostly...
Could you get to Kyiv by river from here?
Yes, you could board here if it was available. Chernihiv, get on, there are tickets, off you go. Greetings from Pripyat, Dozia, greetings from the motherland. I'm currently at the cafe Pripyat. The hospital, the maternity ward where you were born, is literally right next door. By the way, you were also in this cafe, your mom took you, we walked here together. So you were very little. Naturally, we came in with a stroller, we had something to drink there, it was like a memory. See how my daughter felt it. She called me here by the shore. There was an ice cream cafe there. Kids were brought here. There was some kind of promenade where people walked. And on the other side, they swam.
Driven by high ambitions, the builder of Pripyat needed the appropriate infrastructure, and in the shortest time, a project for a football stadium for 5,000 spectators was developed. It was named Avangard. It was supposed to open on May 1st, 1986, but the stadium's history ended 5 days before its opening. By now, its main stand has been engulfed by nature, untouched and abandoned, like a monument to the former significance of the great game in the once exemplary Soviet city.
At this stadium, which was being built and was supposed to open by May 1st, we were supposed to play already. I can imagine how we would have played the second league here, which we aspired to. But unfortunately, we couldn't play a single game. In recent years, we took second place. We were one step short. We lacked infrastructure. What is infrastructure? You know, it's a stadium. There should be appropriate locker rooms, an appropriate field, the quality of the field. There should be hotels to accommodate the teams that come. We had it, you see, it was being built, there was a hotel, everything was there. There was a team. This is the Policy Hotel, the Central Hotel is the largest. In this hotel, they always accommodated the football players who came for scheduled games. Tournaments that were held also accommodated here. We had playoff games here, for example, transition games with 4 teams. Visitors came, they lived here, they ate here in this hotel. Well, we sometimes visited the bar. There's a restaurant we sometimes visited. There weren't always free places. We made arrangements with the waiters. We had football players, friends who stood at the counter, could reserve a place there or something because you couldn't always get in. Well, there were courier cases when someone went out, barely got out. That's how it was in free time. You can't escape this life. This is on that field, which is overgrown, which you can't see at all. Against the backdrop of houses, those little stands there. There's such a track, a running track. This is also somewhere, this is 83, not before the accident. This is 83. 4.
For football fans, the sight of the Avangard stadium can be truly painful. It's like the last hero of a sci-fi movie trying to survive in a post-apocalyptic world. Here, the referee's whistle never sounded. Not a single ball flew into the goal net, and the stands were never filled with spectators. Now only from a bird's eye view can you discern the outlines of the football field and running tracks. The wooden benches have rotted, and everything around has become overgrown with trees. The sound of the wind and the chirping of birds, which have multiplied incredibly with the departure of people, make this place even more surreal. Here, the football past of Pripyat will remain forever buried. With its hopes, victories and defeats, the love of the fans and the passion of the players. In the days following the disaster, the country's top leadership chose to hide the fact of the accident, underestimating the seriousness of what had happened. Literally the day after the reactor explosion, here at the Olympic Stadium, then still called the Republican Stadium, located just 62 miles from Chernobyl, the Soviet Super Derby took place, Spartak versus Dynamo Kiev. 82,000 people watched the crucial match from the stands, and it's unlikely any of them realized what the radiation levels were in the city at that time.
On the 27th, there was a match at this stadium with Spartak, a crucial meeting, an interesting event. The place was packed. Somehow people didn't perceive it. They were heading to the game with Spartak, the USSR championship. And conversation started on the bus that there was a problem. Everything was ablaze at Bazariv's. Well, no one knew how serious it was.
Meanwhile, the wind changed direction, bringing a radioactive air mass into Kyiv. Already on April 27th, the day of the match, in some houses on the northern outskirts of the city, radiation levels could be recorded from 3 to 5 milliroentgens per hour. The situation was worsened by trucks that, in the first days after the accident, drove from Chernobyl on regular roads, spreading radioactive dust. In some places in the city, dosimeters were literally off the scale. Later in '88, a decision was made to replaster all the buildings on Khreshchatyk because radionuclides had deeply penetrated the walls of the houses.
No one really realized the danger yet. Even I, my friend came, who is a specialist, and I saw the state he was in. Well, we thought, well, who knows what?
The first brief official announcement about the incident was made on April 28th, as later explained by Mikhail Gorbachev. Sports events and May Day celebrations in. Kyiv and other cities were not cancelled because the country's leadership did not have a complete picture of what had happened and feared panic. People with balloons and carnations walked under the radioactive rain.
This concealment and this one-sided communication that is only as the party said, caused terrible harm, of course.
There were 100,000, the stadium was full, it was the last game before the Cup Winners' Cup final. We succeeded in terms of the game. The fact that the stadium was 100% full, yes.
If we had known at the beginning, then probably there wouldn't have been, and the Spartak players and the Dynamo Kiev players and the thousands of spectators here at the NSU Olympic, they wouldn't have been exposed. There was already radiation over Kiev then.
Another more important match awaited Dynamo Kiev 5 days after the game with Spartak. In Lyon, at the Gerland Stadium, they faced Atletico Madrid in the Cup Winners' Cup final. The unsuspecting players flew to France, where they were swarmed by hundreds of reporters. The Kiev team thought that the upcoming game had caused such a stir. But the journalists were concerned with only one question: what happened in Chernobyl?
I was met by Oleg Maximenko. We were on very good terms. He was then a correspondent for Central Television in Paris. And I see he has several newspapers, those thick ones with maps. He approached, greeted Lobanovsky, then told me, "Listen, old man, look, newspapers." When I saw the contamination map, the first thing I saw, while there was luggage and all that, I approached Vasilievich Lobanovsky, said, "Here's the trouble. You figure it out." And there were already many journalists, and I already understood that my friend had come. He had a dosimeter. And there they were with dosimeters. Well, I think this is not just for nothing when in Lyon.
We arrived, we flew through Moscow, we landed in Paris, then met Anna there, then we made our way to Lyon. There, journalists all had the same question about Chernobyl and everything else. We said it's nothing serious, everything's fine. Just a regular accident, the leadership will handle it.
We tried to avoid direct questions, and there was a group of journalists, well, some pretty girls, to somehow get the guys to open up. Well, first of all, many of the guys didn't even know what it was about. Lobanovsky still believed in the party and the government. He said it was an accident, but nothing serious.
Well, I had the newspapers with me. You can't escape that. Even without knowing French, you see these maps. Still, Lobanovsky was very worried, already feeling it.
And on the day of the match, he tells me, "Let's go to the center of Lyon." Well, I see him like that. We went there and immediately ran into a column with Atletico flags. About 200 meters away, well, about 5,000 Spaniards. The whole boulevard was packed, and it was hard not to recognize him, so how it would have ended, I don't know. We jumped into some cinema and quietly, dumbly watched some movie.
Valentin Shkerbachev did a live broadcast from France. He started by telling the whole country about the accident at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. This was a big surprise for the people of the Soviet Union, and the leaders of Gosteleradio were shocked by such initiative. The next day, when the game was replayed, Shcherbachev's opening commentary was no longer there.
Live broadcast, it's night here, there's a time difference, but nevertheless the whole Soviet Union is watching, millions of people are watching, and the editor is in my earpiece, and it's a live broadcast, I can't respond. I hear the words, "What are you doing?" And I'm doing what I'm doing, that's it. This is the Gerland Stadium, Lyon, the final of the European Cup Winners' Cup, Atletico Madrid, Dynamo Kiev. Yes, perhaps the history of cup matches on the European stage. For the first time we are faced with one of the teams experiencing a tragedy in their country. The whole world is anxiously watching Ukraine, wounded by the Chernobyl disaster. Here in France, all the newspapers print maps of the contamination of Ukraine, Russia, Belarus. Here in France, every TV channel shows several times what's happening in Chernobyl. And that's why today At the pre-match setup, it was decided to raise the spirits of our compatriots. I was punished by not going with the team to the World Cup, but that's not scary. The main thing is I got the information across. And most importantly, after this match, there was nothing left to do but to form the team based on Kiev's Dynamo.
After this game, we went to Paris, spent the night. The next day, we flew to Moscow. There was a flight delay in Paris. What were we talking about then? They just delayed the flight. We didn't know why. Then they said apparently it was because it was supposedly mined.
In Moscow, no one considered it. We arrived at Sheremetyevo. It was already evening after 10 o'clock. And only passengers recognize Lobanovsky. See, Pasha Yakovenko is carrying this cup, the cups, and already girls, grown men are rushing over. Those who understand what it is, then some kind of, a bus, which was probably about 40 years old that Saturday, comes along, something rattling like that. And at the same time, a fairly new bus arrives with which the second team coach runs out and lists all the team members to come with us to Novogorsk.
And you, Vanna, how are you there?
Well, we get on the bus. I thought it would fall apart on the way to the station. It rattled so much, it was terrifying. But we were driving Lobanovsky with a stone face. We arrived on the night train in Belgrade. We sat there. Despite the fact that people already knew about the radiation, many tried not to leave their homes. The platform was full of fans. They immediately came out of the carriage.
Sergei Boltach had a torn Achilles and he was carried. Lobanovsky was carried. And the whole crowd with songs, shouts, carried everyone to the Dynamo bus.
After Lyon, they already started saying that this was the most dangerous. That is, they washed the streets. It was dangerous to let children out in the sandboxes. That is one after another, and then we began to understand how serious it was.
On May 14, 1986, 3 weeks after the tragedy, Mikhail Gorbachev made a televised address in the best Soviet traditions. He acknowledged the fact of a serious technological disaster, but said nothing about the party's actions to eliminate the consequences. He limited himself to standard phrases like, "The worst was prevented," "Everything is under control," "A commission has been created," "Work will continue." After Gorbachev's speech, Soviet citizens got the impression that the party had absolutely no control over what was happening.
For the first time, we really faced such a formidable force, which is nuclear energy out of control.
On Gorbachev's skull, his birthmark, I took it and placed it on the most contaminated areas of Chernobyl. Everything matches.
Under the Soviets,
There were many secrets. We didn't have press about sex, no drug addiction, no alcoholism, nothing. Therefore, this also had to be kept secret because really releasing such information could cause a union-wide panic.
I'm walking like this. Phew, an arrow. I once checked from there. Guys, you can't be here. I come. Partisans are sitting, smoking, lying down. Guys! There are 500 million Genes here. What are you doing? They don't care because they were forced. They were driven there. They are no longer here. All these men, partisans. They were driven like robots, brazenly. Of course, we must not forget. But who should we not forget? We must not forget. Clearly, these are builders. These are creative matters. But those people who died and were mutilated there underground, it's already cruelty if we forget such people. They practically saved the whole world as a result of the accidents.
At the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, more than 600,000 liquidators received high doses of radiation while participating in firefighting and cleanup. Territories in Austria, Germany, Italy, the United Kingdom, Sweden, Finland, Norway, and several other Western European countries were contaminated. The Chernobyl nuclear power plant continued to operate for another 14 years after the accident. On December 15, 2000, at 1:17 p.m., by order of the President of Ukraine, the last reactor of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant was shut down forever. The football club Stroitel was eliminated from the 1986 season. Their dreams of becoming a professional club were destroyed by the shortcomings of the Soviet nuclear system. The true number of human casualties was never established. The UN study claims 4,000, Grenkist says 200,000. We should also not forget about the indirect victims. These are 50,000 residents of Pripyat who were forcibly relocated. A huge number of dead plants, animals, as well as toxic waste, which to this day pollute the inner regions of Ukraine. And this will continue for another 20,000 years.